Hello, welcome to the Yarn Genie tutorial videos again. Today we're going to look at a 3-needle bind off. 3-needle bind off is a way of making a neat seam when you're actually casting off and then joining two pieces of knitting. Now we use it on, this is our rabbit hood here, little hood with ears, and you'll see this is the top. I pulled it down so you can see. This is the top seam. Now the rabbit hood is actually knitted going all the way around, and then we get to the point where we've got all these stitches on the needle, and what we can do is split them in half and then seam them up and cast them off all in one go. Alternatively, you could of course just cast off and then stitch them together, and using mattress stitch you could actually get this lovely neat join, but it does take a little bit of work to make it happen, and the easy way to do it is using a 3-needle bind off. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now what we've got here is I've got a little bit of sample knitting. It's not a full hood obviously, and I've just got a little marker where halfway round is, just because that helps me do this. You can do this on a circular needle, or if you could split it onto double pointed, you could. When you've got a continuous piece that you want to fold in half and seam together, you can't do this off straight needles because your stitches end up in the wrong order. But of course you could use a 3-needle bind off if, for instance, you had two sides of a shoulder seam, so two separate pieces of knitting, each on a needle. You could then use a 3-needle bind off to cast that off. So you can do it, but for the hood you need to do this on a circular needle. So the first thing we do is we're going to separate these out. We're just going to pull the cable through, and in fact if you want it this way around, oops, let's pull it that way around. So we're sliding it along so that we've got our stitches, half the stitches on each needle.
And your right sides together.
And our right sides together, absolutely, Miss Jo. Right sides must go together. And you must be exactly in the middle, because we are going to match all the stitches together. So often you can split cables and make magic loops wherever you want, but in this case it must be in the middle. So now we haven't taken off our yarn tail or anything yet, so we're just going to knit. And what we're going to do is knit these 2 rows together and cast them off all at the same time. Called 3 needles because you do need 3 needles to do this. These two are 8mm needles, this one is a 6mm needle, and it is quite useful to do this on a slightly smaller needle. It just makes the whole sliding it around a little bit easier, and also it makes your seam a little bit tighter. It's not completely necessary, you can use anything you want, but I do tend to use a slightly smaller needle to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in as if to knit the first stitch on the front needle, and then as if to knit this first stitch on the back needle. We're going to wrap our yarn down and knit these 2 stitches together and slide off both of those stitches. So I've now just got 1 stitch on my smaller needle. I'm going to do the same, so in through the front of these 2 stitches, knit through and slide those 2 off. So now I've got 2 stitches on my needle, 3rd needle. I'm then going to lift the first stitch over the second as a usual cast off or bind off situation. I'm now going back into the first stitch, so I'm just picking up the front loop of each stitch, knitting those together and then lifting the stitch over. And this is how we go. We just repeat this for all of our stitches, lifting that over. So knitting the 2 stitches together, and you can see now why you need to have an even number of stitches, and we lift that one over the back. Knit together.
You can see that neat seam just forming.
Yeah, it is. I shall just get to the end of it and we can show you that in detail, but it does make a fabulously neat seam, and of course all the stitches are lined up on the edge. So it does look really nice, and of course it's actually less work. It is quicker and easier to do this than it is to just cast it off and seam it. But you can do it that way if you prefer, it's completely fine. We're nearly there.
And all our hoods, I think we suggest this method, don't we?
We do suggest the 3 needle bind off, just because it's a really great way of making a very neat top seam. And on the top of the head, of course, it is seen, particularly on a child, because you're always looking down at the top of the head, aren't you? So it is a noticeable seam, and so it's great to get it looking neat and straightforward. You know, it gives a nice end to your knitting. So here we go. Here's the last one. Now you can just pull that through, cut the yarn. Left my scissors somewhere. You can cut that and pull it through to finish. Now what you've got here, you've got a beautiful neat seam at the top. I mean, you can barely see where it is. But if we turn it inside out, this is where the beauty goes. And look, it's a lovely neat seam, all the stitches lined up. So it's just a great way of getting a fabulous looking seam and casting off your work all at the same time. All fabulous. 3 needle bind off.